Oh, yeah. Good evening. I think you're in. Sure.
I got in for the last moments of.
No, okay, now you're in and we hear you. No, okay. No, only that what you know. Good evening. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I want to wish you a happy Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, Tu
tonight. Tonight is Tu Bishvat.
No Tachnun tomorrow. That's the best.
That's right. No Tachnun at Mincha today. It's Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanos. It's the Rosh Hashanah for trees. New Year for trees. Okay. Now, are we going to go up to apple tree and wish it Happy New Year? Well, I don't know if that's such a wonderful idea. What the practical nafkaman does it mean that today is Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanos? The source for this is a Mishnah in Maseches Rosh Hashanah. Right, the very first Mishnah talks about Abba Rosh Hashanah. There are 4 different Rosh Hashanahs, and the last one on the list is Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan. That's a machlokes between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says that Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan is on the 15th. That's what we keep. Beis Shammai say already on the 1st of Shvat. So, what difference does it make whether it's Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan? Why is it especially a new year for trees? What is the significance of that? First of all, practically speaking, Mephoshim explained, Rashi and others, that by Tu Bishvat, the sap of the fruit-bearing trees has risen, and it's from that sap that the fruit will eventually be created. So basically, we have the potential for creating the fruit already available in the tree, already from Tu Bishvat. And that's why it was the significance of the new year for trees. Practical differences in halacha. First of all, the practical difference, that's what we're going to deal with mainly tonight, is what brocha do you make on the fruit? Mishnah says, whatever grows on trees, perosi ilan, you make a brocha, boirei pari ho'etz. And whatever grows on the ground, you make boirei pari ho'adoma, 2 different types of brochas. So how do I know what's boirei pari ho'etz and what is boirei pari ho'adoma? Okay, let's start off with perhaps with a little light-hearted suggestion. How about taking a little trip down to the Chuntebur? Yeah, to go to the greengrocer, the fruit store, or your supermarket, and you look where he's got the fruits. Those are boirei pari ho'etz, and where he's got the vegetables, that's boirei pari ho'adoma. Okay, you take a look. What's under the fruits? Melons. How about melons? No, melons, no. It's definitely not, that doesn't grow on a tree, right? It grows on the ground. Okay, nuts. Oh yes, pistachios, cashews, Brazil nuts, almonds, all these grow on trees. How about peanuts? Pindas. Oh no, pindas don't grow on trees. Pindas grow in the ground. Okay, so peanuts are nuts, but they are nuts over which the broch is very priyadama, whereas most nuts are grown on trees. Okay, let's move over onto the other side, to the vegetable department. And there we see something nice and green, and it's shaped like a pear, and it's called an avocado. Avocado, if you ask somebody, what is an avocado? Is it a fruit or is it a vegetable? So they'll answer you, well, avocado, it's a vegetable. We treat it like a vegetable. We treat it like the carrots, like the tomatoes, like the cucumbers, like the potatoes. Wrong. Because do you know where the avocado grows? Avocado grows on an avocado tree. And the correct bracha for the avocado is boirei pari ho'etz. So our trip to the Chuntebur or to the supermarket will not help us too much when it comes to defining the halacha of what's called pri ho'ilan, fruit of a tree, what's called the fruit of a ground. Very pri adam. It's not going to help us. What do you do when you want to find out what halacha is? They take a look at the sources. And let's start off now by taking a look at a little line of Gemara with a lot of significance. And this little line of Gemara is in Brachas, Maseches Brachas, that Mem Omed Aleph. The Gemara says, Heicha mevorchinon beirei pri ha'etz. On what type of growth do you make a bracha of beirei pri ha'etz? Okay, so we'll say it grows on a tree. All right, you've convinced us. Yes, it has to grow on a tree. A tree, what is a tree? Well, I'll tell you what a tree is. A tree has roots, then it has a trunk, then it has branches, and then it has twigs with leaves, and on the end of the twigs, that's where the fruit grows. So that's called a tree. Apples grow like that, oranges, pears, cherries, plums, they all grow like that. They're all clearly beirei pri ha'etz. There are other items which are clearly beirei pri ha'adama, as we've spoken of the peanuts which grow in the ground, root vegetables which grow in the ground, those which grow on the ground, the cucumbers and tomatoes which grow just off on the ground, they're clearly ha'adama. But there's also what's called a gray area, an in-between area. There are certain types of plants which might be beirei pri ha'etz or might be pri ha'adama, or we remain with the sun. Okay, says the Gemara. Heicha mevorchinon beirei pri ha'etz, heicha dishaktos le'leperi, isa legavza. So first of all, says the Gemara, on what you make beirei pri ha'etz, if you take away the fruits, then the gavza remains. I'm not deliberately not translating what this word gavza means. The hoda mafik. Then later on, this same plant, the same tree, will have new fruit growing on it. But where when you remove the fruits, then the gavza is no longer there to produce new fruit. We don't make a bracha of beirei pri ha'etz on such fruit. We make ela beirei pri ha'adama. That's beirei pri ha'adama. Okay, so the Gemara is saying that everything depends on the gavza. This gavza. What is a gavza? Okay, we'll take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, "Ho'anach shel eitz," the branch of the tree. So what's Rashi telling us? Rashi is telling us that you have a tree and you have a branch, and the fruit grows on the branch. You remove the fruit this year. There's no more fruit on the tree. You've removed it, taken it away, you've harvested the fruit, and you have a branch. Next year, there will again be fruit because the branch remains. So that's called a tree. But according to Rashi, if the branch also falls off, there's just the trunk and no branch, the branch has to regenerate, grow again, then that's not called a tree. You don't make beirei pri ha'etz on such a fruit, you'll have to make beirei pri ha'adama. That's how Rashi learned. In the Mordechai quotes two shittas. There's a Mordechai in Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph. Mordechai says, he quotes here, Kosav b'tshuvas hagoyim. The tshuvas hagoyim says, Kol ilan the yovesh b'sitva. Any tree which dries out, the sitva is in the autumn, v'kolu gavzi v'tarfi legamre. And the gavzi, we don't know what he means by gavzi yet, and tarfi and the leaves, legamre, they completely dry out, v'choyref. V'hoda pa'ari mishroshav. And then afterwards, the tree grows again from its roots. Then we make the bracha of beirei pri ha'adama. Okay, and if you remove the fruit, but the gavza remains, and then it produces fruit, that's called pri ha'etz. Okay, so that's the Tshuvas HaGoyim. the shita of the Chus HaGoinim is that when the tree disappears, right? If the tree disappears in the winter, the eights, the actual, then that's called Paradoma. But if the actual tree remains, the actual trunk of the tree remains, even if the branch does fall off, that's still called a tree. That's still called a tree. And he brings a raya from the Yerushalmi. Okay, so that's another shita. That the gavza doesn't mean the branch. Gavza means the trunk of the tree. And we do have an example of that in the banana. What happens to the banana? If you go into the Jordan Valley in the summer, you will see a lot of banana, well, they call them banana trees. They're really banana plants. And they grow nice and tall, and the bananas are grow on top. But if you go there in the winter, you'll see there's nothing much to see. There's nothing, it's all collapsed all the way down to the ground. So basically, the tree has disappeared. And that's why you make Bayre Pri Adama on the banana and not Bayre Pri Baetz. Okay. Fine. So the Mordechai continues and he quotes another shitta, another opinion. And the meaning of the world is people is to make very for eight. That this branch stays for a long time in this year. And the tree comes again, grows back the next year. The eight soy miskayim mishana leshana. But the eighth actual tree, the trunk of the tree, that remains from year to year. Okay, says the Mordechai at the end, the whole pre shesafikloi in pre or eights in pre adama, yavoyach pre adama. And obviously, if you're in doubt whether it's pre or eight or pre adama, you make very pre adama because every tree grows on the ground, and you are you'll be safe if you make very pre adama. If you're not sure whether you make very pre. Okay, so that's the second shita. So we have here the shita of Rashi, who says if the branch falls off in the winter, then that's called not called a tree anymore. That also seems to be the Mordechai in the name of the Ram, the beginning. We have the Tu Bishvat who says even if the branch falls off, but as long as the actual trunk of the tree remains, it's still called the eight. And now we're going to come to a third shita, a third opinion. The third opinion is that of the Rosh. So the Rosh says, we have a Gemara which says that any plant that creates eros mishana l'shana nikra eitz, anything that produces fruit from 1 year after the other without having to replant it, that's called an eitz. It's called a tree. He says, but if you have to sow it every year, there's absolutely nothing left of the original tree, then that's called wadam. So that's this, perhaps that we'll call it I think we'll call it most chumradika. That's the most encompassing shita of the Rosh. The Rosh says, if the branch falls off in the winter, it's still called a tree. Even if the actual trunk of the tree disappears, it's still called a tree. As long as there's something there to regenerate, to grow back without having been sowed. If you need to sow it every year, that's called a bari paradoma. But anything less than that is called bari paradoma. Okay, three shittas we have here. Three shittas in understanding the word gavza, right? Is gavza the branch of the tree? Is gavza the trunk of the tree? Is the gavza that there's nothing left at all? There's just some sort of roots which regenerate in the spring. Okay, The Rosh actually quotes a Tosefta, which we just mentioned in Tosefta in Kilayim, and he seems to have a Tosefta is a very good proof to have on your side, right? If you have a Tosefta, Tosefta is written by the Tanoim, right? I'm sure you all are aware. Rabbeinu Kodesh Yehuda Nasi, he edited the sayings of the Tanoim, and he included those he thought were the most authoritative, most reliable in the Mishnayos. But there were a lot of sayings of the Tanoim which were excluded. They went into what's called the Brisa. Brisa is an Aramaic word meaning outside. Later on, Reb Chia and Reb Oisha made a second editing, and they compiled something called the Tosefta. Tosefta means an appendix, an addition to each of the Masechtas. And these contain sayings of the Tanoim, which do not argue with what's written in the Mishnayos. They've been tested by Reb Chia and Reb Oisha. They were tried out. The Gemara says at the end of Chulin, Kol Masnisa, the Loy Misnaya Bei Reb Oisha, La Samchi. Any sayings of Tanoim, which is not included in Tosefta, and in the Mishnayos of Tosefta, is not considered to be reliable, and therefore we can't ask a kasha from on one Tana from something he said elsewhere in an unedited brisa. Okay, so there's a Tosefta, which is an edited brisa, which seems to support the Shita of the Rosh. Now, if we take a look in the Achronim, so we've been looking at the Rishonim, we'll see that there are other definitions of what's called a tree. There's a Divrei Malkiah. Shais and Shuvas Divrei Malkiah, very recent Achron, he says, something, trees grow nice and tall. They have to have a minimum height. And we know that something which is less than 3 tefachim high is considered like on the ground. So he says, you may have some sort of tree-like fruit-producing plant, and it has certain features which are like a tree, but it's very low. It grows very low. It's the branches that may spread out a long way, but they're low. They're very low. They don't grow higher than 3 tefachim. They're within 3 tefachim of the ground. Okay, an example. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of how cranberries grow. Cranberries, right, seem to be, are they treated like a fruit? And they have the actual plant has a lot of the features of a fruit, right? There's a root there. There's something which is like a trunk, and it's hard. It's not soft, and it grows many years, a number of years, but it's very low. It grows very close to water. So that's why the opinion of many poskim is that on cranberries you make very piadoma. That fits in with the definition of the Divrei Malkiah. Divrei Malkiah says any plant which does not reach a height of 3 tefachim is considered not to be a tree, but a plant on which you make the bracha of very piadoma and not very piadoma. Shayas and Chuvas halachos ketanos. The halachos ketanos talks about the nature of the stem or the trunk. At the beginning, we talked about a tree. What does a tree look like? A tree's got solid wood roots, and a solid wood trunk. What happens if this plant has got a trunk, and it can be quite high, but it's not solid, it's hollow, it's empty, there's empty space inside. It says that Shais and Chuvas halachos ketanos, that very fact will change its status. It's not considered to be ha'etz, it's not going to be a tree, an ilon, it's considered to be a plant, and the fruit of that tree you will make boirei pri madam. And we'll see, we're going to have an example of that coming up fairly soon during the course of this year. Okay. Radvas. There's a Shais and Chuvas Haradvas. Now, the Radvas had a very interesting discussion. There was a discussion about the Bandijan. What is a Bandijan? The Bandijan, we know it better known. It's better known to us as the aubergine, or in America, the eggplant. Now, if you ask anybody about aubergine or eggplants, chatzil in Ivrit, they'll say to you, that's a vegetable. It's eaten like a vegetable. Okay? Is it a vegetable? Well, let's talk about some of the other repercussions of whether it's considered to be a vegetable or a fruit. And you know, you just mentioned one nafkamina, right? The nafkamina, one practical difference is what bracha do you make on the fruit? Do you make a bracha of Baypuri 8 on the fruit of a tree? Or otherwise, if it's from a plant, not a tree, it's Baypuri Adama. But there are a number of other very important differences. Kilei hakerem, you know, you're not allowed to plant kilayim, other species of plant life, inside a kerem, inside a vineyard. There has to be a certain separation. I don't know if you're aware of this. You know, the Arabs here in Eretz Israel, they have a habit of making use of the ground in the vineyard during the winter. During the winter, there are no grapes on the vines. Okay, so what do you have here? You have a completely dead vine. It's unproductive. So these Arabs have found a way of using the vineyard. In between the vines, they grow all sorts of vegetables. You know, vegetables in between the vines. Now, for a boy, there's no issue of kirai kerem, but for us, it's a problem, right? Because it's a kerem, it's a vineyard, and you're not allowed to plant other types of plant in the vineyard. However, a vine, a grapevine, is a type of tree. And when it comes to kilaim of trees, the situation is completely different. There's a Gemara in Bava Kama, at the base. The Gemara talks there about you have date palms and vines growing near each other. And somehow their proximity, they're being close together, affecting the taste. So the Amora says, well, you know, you have to remove one of them. What for? Not because of kilayim, but because of it's ruining the taste. It's not good for the taste. But the discussion in the Gemara over there is about pashtus. Normally, you're not allowed to uproot, destroy fruit trees. But if one fruit tree is causing damage, then you're allowed to remove it. And that was the situation over there. One tree was damaging the taste, the quality of the fruit of the other tree. Okay, how could they be planted together in the first place? The answer is there's absolutely no problem. There's no problem in planting different types of trees next to each other. You can have an apple next to an orange, next to the date palm, next to a cherry tree, one next to each other. I don't know if it's a clever idea. It's not advisable. Please do not take any agricultural advice from this statement. But as far as Hilchas Kilayim is concerned, no problem. Similarly, in a kerem, in a vineyard, if you would plant another fruit tree in a vineyard, right? Again, I don't think it's advisable. But as far as the din of Kilayim is concerned, no problem. So then it makes a very big difference if what we're dealing with is considered to be a tree or a non-tree, a plant, some other type of plant. So if it's a tree, you can plant it inside the kerem if you want to, if you think it's a good idea. You can plant it close to the vines. It doesn't matter. Right? The din of kilayim with trees is after by grafting different types of trees together. Right? Let's say take a shoot or a branch of the apple and plant it onto a pear or something like that. That would be kilayim. But having trees which stand alone, stand separate next to each other of different species is absolutely no problem. But it is a problem if this is not considered to be a tree, but rather a plant. Papaya Adama is a problem in the kerem. Also, next nafkamina is orla. That is, the Torah says that when you plant an itzmacho, you plant a fruit tree, it's going to be arelim. It's going to be the fruit of the first 3 years is also to eat and also to derive any benefit. Also the achila, also the anon. That's nafka if it's a tree. But if it's not a tree, it's just a plant. The first year, the first time you plant the plant, and you get a crop of edible crop of produce, go ahead and eat it. No problem. Even with the tree, Wait 3 years, you can't touch the fruits. Also, has to be destroyed. The fourth year, there's a din of Ravai. The fourth year fruit of a tree needs to be either taken to Yerushalayim and eaten within Yerushalayim, or has to be, nowadays, you have to be poida, Ravai, the produce of the fourth year. Not enough to me. Another practical difference, but you haven't thought of this. What bracha do you make on the fruit, on smelling the fruit? You would say atzei v'samim or isvei v'samim, right? Atzei v'samim on when it comes from another fruit. It comes from a tree, a fruit tree. The eights, if they have a sweet-smelling wood from the tree, you make atzei v'samim, and if it's a plant, you make isvei v'samim. Asev is like a herb or plant. Another difference, a major difference, is also the Kedusha Shvius. How do we determine the Kedusha Shvius of a tree and of a non-tree? If it is a tree, and the same applies also with Trumas and Maestras, we're going to explain it separately. This is also very relevant to Tu Bishvat. Whatever grows on a tree, its Kedusha Shvius is determined by the Chanoto, the time of, well, some say the beginning, when the blossom falls off and the fruit starts to form, and some hold it's the third of the growth of the fruit. If that takes place in the Shemitah year, then it's got Kedusha Shvius. If that took place before the Shemitah year, even though most of the growth did take place in the Shemitah year, it has no Kedusha Shvius. For example, we now have oranges, citrus fruits, other fruits, winter fruits in Eretz Yisrael, and it's the middle of the Shemitah year. And these fruits have no Kedusha Shvius. Why is that? Because even though they were picked in the Shemitah year, the Chanoto took place last year, in the 6th year. And when it comes to Kedusha Shvius, what's important, what determines the connection to the Shemitah year is, when did the Chanoto take place? Similarly, when it comes to Trumas and Maestras, you know that Trumas and Maestras, taking Trumas and Maestras runs in a 3-year cycle. Right? After the Shemitah year, the cycle starts, fresh starts again. Year 1, year 2, we take Truma Gedola, then Meiser Rishon, then Trumas Meiser, right? Truma Gedola, that's a little more than Min HaTorah, just a very small amount. The Rabbanon, a 40th or 50th or 60th, depending on how generous you are. And that goes to the Kohen, and it's got Kedusha. It can only be eaten by a Kohen who is Tahor, and the produce has to be Tahor. Then, after that, a tenth of what's left is given to the Levi. Now, the Levi can eat this and share it with a Yisrael after he's taken Trumas Meiser. He takes a tenth from the tenth, and that's given to the Kohen as well. Okay, after all that, there's another separation that takes place. And in years 1, 2, and 4 and 5 of the 6-year Shemitah cycle, that is Meiser Sheni. Right? We separate Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni is separated a tenth of after the Truma Gedola and the Meiser Rishon has been taken, and that was meant to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Nowadays, what we do, we can't do that anymore. Unfortunately, we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. We don't have Kedusha Yerushalayim in the same way. So what we do is we redeem it on a coin. It has to be redeemed on a coin. What happens in years 3 and 6 of the cycle? In years 3 and 6 of the cycle, we don't take Truma Meiser Sheni after the Truma Gedola and the Meiser Rishon. We take Meiser Oni. Meiser Oni is a Meiser, another tenth of the tenth, right? That's left, and we give that to the poor people, and that has no kedusha. Right? It has no kedusha. Anybody can eat it. There's nothing. It has to be separated from that. It doesn't have to be redeemed. Okay. So once again, what belongs to the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th year, and what belongs to the 3rd and 6th year varies It depends on whether the produce we're talking about is the fruit of a tree or the fruit of the ground. If it's the fruit of the tree, once again, what determines the connection to a particular year is the chanota. If the chanota took place in year 1 or 2 or 4 or 5, then even if the fruit grows much later, what we take is, if it's only picked in the 3rd year or the 6th year, it doesn't matter. That still has the din of Maisa Sheni. But if the chanota took place in years 3 or 6, even though the fruit grew ripened in the years 4 or 7 in the Shemitah year, from that you take Maisa Sheni. So again, if it grew in years 2, if it grew in years 2 or 4, even though it was picked in years 3 and 6, which is year of Maisa Oni, you would take Maisa Sheni. If something grew in years 3 and 6, the Chanota took place in years 3 and 6, even though it was picked in year 4, which is the year of Maisa Sheni, or it was picked in year 7, which is the year of Shemitah, you would take Maisa Oni. So all these differences, about 6 differences, apply, are determined whether this fruit is a fruit of a tree or the fruit of the ground, Priya or 8 or Priya Adam. Okay, so the Maisa, there were a number of products which were the Sophic. They were the Poskim throughout the generations had a doubt about whether certain products were very Priya 8 or very Priya Adoma, and all the differences that we mentioned. Okay, one of them was the bandijan. Okay, I don't know if you how good your Arabic is. Mine's not good at all, but I've seen this word used in the Poskim, and that is the aubergine. The aubergine or the eggplant. There was a lot of discussion of whether that's mutter or do the dinim of Ola apply. Is this a very pre or 8 or is this very pre or Adon? What's the discussion all about? So let's take a look at the tshuva of the Radvaz. Radvaz speaks about this in 3 different places, and this is the tshuva in Siman Tov Tov Kuf Samach Vav. שאלת ממני, הודיע חודעתי במה שראיס תצס משכילי עם נזהרים שלא לאכול הברינגן משום חשש עולה. He says, look here, you asked me, you've seen some people don't want to eat hatsil. They don't want to eat the eggplant. They don't want to eat it. Why not? Because they're concerned it might be ola. Might be ola. Okay. Now, how does the oil, the bandijan grow? And some people just eat it, no problem. Perhaps he says, perhaps it depends where it grows, perhaps a different subspecies. They ask if you hold it's osser. So what happens if somebody cooked some chatzil in a saucepan in a pot, and you hold this osser? So do you have to touch the pot? Okay, so the Radvaz discusses this, and he quotes here after Ferach, Historia Parchi, and he says that this type of we'll call it produce is eaten in Eretz Yisrael. So what is it? How does it grow? How does it grow? Well, does it have a hard stem? Does it fit in with any of the definitions of the tree that we had before? Well, does the chatzil grow like a tree. You have a chatzil tree with a roots, a trunk, branches. No, it seems to grow like a plant, like a regular plant. So after the Ravaz brings all the different shittas, that shitta of Rashi, if you remember that if the branch falls off in the winter, in the autumn, the winter, that's not considered a tree anymore. Okay, it's for sure this chatzil, this aubergine, is not considered to be a fruit, a tree. What about the other two shittas? The other shitta that Mordechai quotes? Does the gezar remain? Does the actual so to speak trunk remain? There's no real trunk there at all. But he says, I'll tell you a very simple reason why I think there should be Parei Adama. And that is, you know what happens? What happens is that there's the eggplant, the aubergine, is sown in the first year number one. Okay, then fairly short time within the first year, you already get a nice crop. And you know something, those are the best aubergines. Best aubergines are the ones which will grow within the first year. Those are the best. Okay. Now, what happens is when this crop has been harvested, they go and cut them down close to the ground. And you know what happens? There's a little stem left just above the ground. And then new produce grows in the year number two. And the produce of year number two, not that good. Doesn't taste good. Doesn't taste as good. It's definitely on a much lower level of quality than the produce of year number one. And it'll grow a third crop as well. But that third crop, don't eat it. It contains certain substances which are really poisonous. Okay, so let's say we have here a plant. It produces fruit. Year number one, excellent fruit. Year number two, no, passable. You can eat it. Perhaps, you say nowadays, put a lot of mayonnaise or ketchup on it, you can eat it. Fine. Passable. Year three, don't touch it. What about year four? Right, the 3 years of Allah, and year number 4, gone. Not there anymore. Okay, so if it's not there anymore, are you going to say years 1, 2, and 3, it was Allah? So the Ravaz got a few tshuvas, and he came, and originally he said before he came to Eretz Yisrael, he thought, well, perhaps there might be a problem here. Perhaps it's not okay. Then he said, you know something? I have a definition here. And I'm actually quoting a Tosefta. I had this Tosefta, which I'm quoting, and it says, any plant which produces fruit within the first year of planting is not considered to be a tree. It may have other attributes, other qualities which are like a tree, but if it produces fruit that early, that's not considered to be a tree. That's a very priority. And he quotes here Shlomo Garmizan. Now, this psak of the Ravaz aroused a lot of discussion. One of the main reasons for discussion, it's a chidush. It's not actually has Chazon Ish says you don't find it any source for this in the Gemara. It's absolutely a completely new idea. And what's another problem is that there are Talmidei Chacham nowadays who are bakiim, who are experts. They have a thorough knowledge of all the Tosefta, and they can't find that Tosefta which defines very anything which grows within the first year as being a very Adama. That by definition. Whatever else there might be, the growth produces fruit within the first year. It's not called Papaya. It must be Papaya. By the way, the Mefoshim in Hilchos Orla, Hilchos Orla comes in Shulchan Aruch in Yerodei Chelek Gimel. There's a Sim Reish Tzadi Dalet which talks about the dinim of Orla in Eretz Yisrael, which is the Raisa, and Orla in Chutz La'aretz, which exists. There's an Issa of Orla in Chutz La'aretz, Halacha L'Moshe Misina. But there's a big difference between the two Isurim. Orla in Eretz Yisrael, we said, is the Raisa. And therefore, whenever you have a Sofek Orla, you have to be Machmir. You're not sure whether it's Orla or not, be Machmir. Masha Enke, which is not the case in Chutz La'aretz. Sofek Orla, the Chutz La'aretz, is Mutar. Now, what type of Sofek are we discussing? So the Mefoshim say, do you know how far this goes? You have a Goysha farmer. Yeah, he's growing fruit in his orchard. And it could well be that these trees are Orla trees. But he's selling outside the orchard. He's not selling within the orchard. You can buy those fruit because you don't know for a fact. You haven't been told, oh, it comes from these trees. You didn't see it being taken. So that's the extent of that. Sofek Orla b'chutz la'aretz is mutar. How practical is the chashash Orla? Well, when Mefoshim in Hilchos Orla, as I was saying before, in Yerodei, say, you know something, you have a halachas, you're going to get schar for the limud Torah, and it could be one day we'll have a problem. But you know, nowadays, trees don't produce fruit, viable fruit, edible fruit within the first 3 years of planting. Whatever they produce is, if anything, is not edible. Okay. So I had a ha'ara on this from an advert which I saw many years ago. I had a question on this. It was an advert for DSM. Now, DSM is a Dutch chemical company, as I'm sure you're aware. And they had a picture there, drawings of trees with nice fruit. And they said, if you use our product, our chemicals, you will be able to get nice fruit from your trees instead of having to wait 3-4 years within a year or two. Okay, let's say we had some Jewish farmer here in Eretz Yisrael, or some farmer here in the Chutz La'aretz, and you know and you want to buy from him in his orchard, and he used these chemicals, right? He's used this technology, and he produced fruit within the first 3 years of the growth of the tree. Wouldn't be allowed to eat it. Okay. Yeah. So the Chazon Ish discusses the rabbis. The Chazon Ish says, this is right at the end of Hilchos Orla. And he says like this. The Bikei Yosef, the Chidah, quotes what the Achronim have to say about the bandija, about the aubergine. And he says, "V'nira the moitzin ha'alin va'peiros min ha'geza miskayim ad gimel shana." He says, you know something? The leaves and the fruit come from the stem, from the trunk, and this trunk does stay good for 3 years. However, all the Achronim say, not fruit of a tree. It's not Papaya. It's Papaya Doma. Okay. Now, the Chidah says the reason for this is why it's Papaya Doma is because of the decline, the deterioration in the quality of the fruit. As we mentioned earlier, the best quality aubergine is from the first year's growth. After year 2, passable. In year 3, don't touch it. And that's exactly the opposite of what happens with a regular tree. A regular tree, first year, if there's any fruit, probably no fruit. If there's any fruit, it's not edible. Year 2, also not. 3, no. The fruit, really good fruit starts growing in year 4, in year 5, and it starts improving, not deteriorating. So the pattern of growth is exactly the opposite of that of a tree. So says the so the Goinim said, if the geza doesn't last, the trunk doesn't last, then that's it's not called a tree. Whether the root of this plant produces a new stem, or the stem completely destroyed and you have to sow it again, doesn't make any difference. That is called the Bei Pri Adama. Okay, then the Chazon Ish quotes Radvaz. Radvaz says that if it produces fruit within the year, then it's called a yerek by definition. That on its own, you don't have to look at anything else. If it produces fruit, Bible produce, within the first year of it after planting, that's called a yerek, not called a. So the Chazon Ish says, I don't accept. He says, look, the Radvaz says he's relying on source, the Tosefta. We can't find that Tosefta. We don't know exactly what's going on here. So this is like this. This is the Chazon Ish. Lemaisa, practically speaking, what the Radvaz says is not sufficient on its own to define this particular plant as a Hadoma and not as a plant rather than a tree. But he says, combine that with another factor. And then he says, let's say, number one, produces fruit within the first year. Okay, that's the chatzil. And it doesn't last longer than 3 years. Then there's no problem of ola, and the bracha is very pri adama. Okay, so what the Chazon Ish is telling us is, we have to take in all the facts, all the aspects of this particular plant. And the chatzil, it does last 3 years. Yes, it does last 3 years. It has a stem, has a root. The produce grows from the same root, the same stem every year, basically. It grows. So it has definitely got similarities to a tree. But the two dissimilarities, the number one, the fact that it does produce fruit within the first year, unlike a tree, and that the quality of the fruit declines instead of improves, like with a tree. With that, we can say on this the fruit of the bandijan, on the eggplant, the aubergine, you make Bei Pri Adama, and you don't make Bei Pri Eitz. And there's no problem of ola. And the Chazon Ish adds another very interesting. He says like this: just imagine that we would apply the dinim of ola to this aubergine. So the first year, it grows fruits within the first year. First year's fruit's good. Can't touch it, ola. Year number 2, edible. Can't touch it, ola. Year 3, can't eat it. Year 4, okay, now is the time to eat the fruit of the tree, if it's a tree. It's gone. There's no tree anymore. Says the Chazon Ish, is it possible that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a plant with fruit, and this plant is something where you can't eat the fruit? HaKadosh Baruch Hu created all these beautiful different species of fruits and plants, vegetables, all these different types, for us to enjoy, to make a bracha to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He made a very nefashas rabbis v'chesam al kamash b'brasa lachis b'hem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us not only what is essential for our life, but so many other nefashas rabbis, so many other different products. He wants us to enjoy them and to thank him for it, to appreciate it. So obviously that's another reason why a plant which produces fruit, let's say viable fruit, for less than, but it does not get into the 4th year. There's no good fruit in the 4th year. by definition, that plant cannot be subject to the dinim of oil. Okay, now let's ask another question. There's another one of these type of plants about which there's a lot of discussion, and that is the papaya. The papaya is the pawpaw is a very nice fruit, very tasty fruit. It grows, I think, in tropical and subtropical countries, things like Mexico and so on. And the question is that subject to the dinim of olah? Well, how does the papaya grow? It's actually got a very long stem. It can grow between, I think, 2 meters and 7 meters high. It can grow quite high. And the fruit always grows at the top. In other words, they're like spikes, like you see on a palm tree, like spikes. That spikes are there because in earlier years, the fruit grew there, the fruit fell off, and then the plant continued growing. It continued growing up. And there was another set of notches on the side. There the fruit grew, the fruit fell off, and then it continues growing up. So it keeps, every year, the fruit does not grow from branches, it grows directly from the basic stem. And it definitely lasts many years. It can last for many years. It lasts definitely more than 3 years. But number one, it doesn't go off a branch. Right? It goes directly on the stem, we call it the trunk. And there's another feature which I have to tell you about. And that is, if you were to cut open a papaya tree, do you know what you would see inside the tree? Nothing, empty space. It's hollow. Okay, so we had a shita before, which said that if the tree is hollow, it's got a solid trunk, then no din involved. That's not called a tree. Okay, so there's a well-known tshuva, a very seminal tshuva of the Ben Ish Chai, Rav Pa'olim, in Chelik Beis Siman Lamed, which talks all about the papaya, the tree of the papaya, and it grows, and it grows, and it grows. It goes for many years. It grows high. No branches. Okay, there are no branches. If there are no branches, you've seen that some trees which say no branches. No, it's not a tree. It's also its trunk. It's hollow. That's another reason to say it's not a tree. It should be very priadoma. Okay. So there's a lot of discussion. It's getting a bit late now. Originally, the Ben Ish Chai wanted to say that the papaya is very bright. Nevertheless, why is that? Because the Maisa produces good fruit, and the fruit actually tastes good. It's not sort of like the fruit of the years 2, 3, 4, etc. are of a lesser quality than that of the first year. Okay, so then that would give the status of being in Ilah. But the Maisa, halfway through the tshuva, this is 2 columns here discussing it and saying that it should be read very Adoma. You turn over the page and you see column number 3. He says, "After Yishuv beside Ishmael, Reisi Shatzoich Ladon Zamin Yeret." Says it into the conclusion that is meant to be a Yeret, and the brok is very for Adoma, and there's no din Ola. And why is that? So once again, he says, do you know why? Because papaya is very quick to produce fruit. It produces fruit in the first year. And the Radvaz says that any plant which produces fruit in the first year is Adama. It can't be a tree. It can't be an Ilah. Okay, so that's what's settled it according to the Rav. The papaya is very Adama, not very great. I have to tell you that not everybody agrees with the Rav Polim, with the Ben Ish Chai, and some still say it's a sofek. It's a sofek because the papaya has many of the attributes of a tree, right? It grows, lasts 4 years, you have viable fruit, it grows above the ground, the trunk, even though it's hollow, stays there. It remains from year to year. So according to some of the Rishonim, that's considered to be a tree. And therefore the tree does a sofek. Now, that creates a lot of issues, because if you say, I'm not sure whether this is a tree or this is a plant, what happens when it comes to number one, olah? So you can't eat the fruit of the tree in the first 3 years, not only in the 4th year, and that with pidyon, with redeeming it. In Chutz La'aretz is much less of a problem, because you have a papaya in Chutz La'aretz, that's where they grow mostly. We say sofek olah, mutter in Chutz La'aretz. Okay, so let's wrap things up and say, you have your plate with fruits for Tu Bishvat. You want to put avocado on there, that's very, very good. Don't put your aubergine on there. We haven't discussed this type of, there's a certain type of pepper, not the black or white pepper, but the capsicum anuum, that's what we call the chipka, the type of sharp pepper, which is also there's a lot of discussion about that in the Rishonim, in the Achronim, and many of those who are choshish that there may be a din of olah, right? Olah on a type of sharp pepper, these long red sharp peppers that are green. That's also a lot of discussion. And there are those who machmir and they refrain from eating it if it's this chashash olah. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of choice of fruits. Here in Eretz Yisrael, a lot of fruits which grow here. We also have some fruits which are imported. Some people have a minhag to eat 15 different types of fruit 15. On 15, yes, on Tu Bishvat, and corresponding to the 15 Shia Hamalos. There's another minhag, there's a special tefillah, which people say on Tu Bishvat for a nice esrog, because that's where the esrog really starts growing from Tu Bishvat onwards. Here in Eretz Yisrael, I think the tefillah needs to be even stronger than in other years, because it's the Shemitah year and there's an issue of avodas karka. You're not allowed to do certain types of agricultural work this year. The basic definition of whatever it is to keep the plant or the tree going, that's mutter, it's the drabonon. But what is it to improve it is also. So there's a discussion is producing Mehudadik esrog, very nice esrogim free of any blemish. Is that considered leokume to keep it going, or to improve? And the maskana, the most poskim hold that it's called to make it kosher, that may be called leokume to keep it going. But to make it mehuda, that's avroya, and then that's also. So we have to daven that he should give us a beautiful esrog. We want to use all the payers of the world, all these nefoshes rabbis that HaKadosh created, whether it's Ha'adama, whether it's Ha'etz. We want to celebrate the fact the Adam Eitz Al-Seder, man is like the tree of the field, and we want to be productive. We want to dedicate our lives, every aspect of our lives, even enjoying the beautiful fruits. And Yerushalmi says a person will be brought to din after 120 years and asked, no, HaKadosh says, I made this beautiful world. Why didn't you enjoy it? So let's continue enjoying the beautiful fruits of the tree today, especially the fruits of the tree. And thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Mitzvah Shem, we should be zoicha very soon to all of us to be in Eretz Yisrael and to fulfill all the mitzvahs of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael and the mitzvahs hatluim ba'aretz, d'oraisa, shmita d'oraisa, with great simcha. Kol tov Rabbi Isai. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
Very interesting
Amen.
story.